Every day, countertop fabricators, construction workers, miners, sandblasters, and other tradespeople are exposed to respirable crystalline silica on the job.
Silica dust is released when materials like stone, concrete, brick, and engineered stone are cut, drilled, or polished, and over time, that dust can scar the lungs and cause silicosis, a progressive and potentially disabling disease.
When companies fail to control this exposure, workers can be left facing lifelong respiratory damage. In this video, we'll break down what you need to know about silicosis injury claims, including who may qualify and what legal options may be available. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with silicosis, contact Gianaris Trial Lawyers for a free consultation to discuss your case. What is silicosis? Silicosis is a permanent lung disease caused by inhaling respirable silica dust, often during years of cutting or grinding materials like stone or concrete. The dust scars the lungs, making it harder to breathe, and symptoms may not appear for decades. Even after exposure stops, the damage can continue to worsen. Because the disease is preventable with proper safety measures, some workers pursue legal action when they were not adequately protected. How crystalline silica dust causes lung damage. When materials containing crystalline silica are cut or ground, they release fine dust that can be inhaled deep into the lungs. Repeated exposure causes inflammation and permanent scarring, reducing the lung's ability to absorb oxygen. Over time, this can lead to worsening shortness of breath and fatigue. Heavy or prolonged exposure has also been linked to lung cancer, COPD, and other serious conditions. These medical links are often central to silicosis lawsuits, where the exposure must be connected to the job and the resulting lung disease. Acute versus chronic silicosis. Silicosis can develop at different speeds, depending on the level and duration of exposure. Chronic silicosis is the most common form and typically appears after many years of lower-level exposure. Accelerated silicosis develops more quickly after higher exposure levels. Acute silicosis can occur within months or a few years after extreme exposure and may cause severe, rapid breathing problems. In all forms, the lung damage is permanent and can continue to worsen even after exposure ends. Because symptoms may appear years later, legal options often depend on when the diagnosis was made and the evidence of past exposure. What to do if you've been diagnosed with silicosis? If you've been diagnosed with silicosis, focus first on protecting your health. Follow your doctor's treatment plan and complete any recommended lung testing to monitor progression. Next, document your exposure history, including job sites, employers, and tasks that involved silica dust. Keep copies of medical records, imaging, and work documents, as these can become critical evidence. Before discussing your condition with employers or insurers, consider speaking with an experienced silicosis attorney to understand your rights and the steps needed to preserve a potential claim. Who is most at risk for silicosis? Silicosis risk is highest in jobs where silica dust is generated repeatedly, especially during dry cutting or grinding without proper controls. Recent data has shown a spike in cases linked to engineered stone countertop work. Even though safety regulations exist, exposure still happens when protective measures are inadequate or ignored, placing certain trades at significantly higher risk over time. Professions at high risk for silicosis: stone fabrication and countertop manufacturing workers. construction workers, including concrete cutting and demolition crews, miners and quarry workers, sandblasters, foundry and metal casting workers. Silicosis symptoms and warning signs. Silicosis symptoms can develop slowly, which is why many people don't connect them to inhaling silica dust until the condition has progressed. Because silicosis is a progressive lung disease, early discomfort can turn into lasting breathing impairment after prolonged exposure at work. Common silicosis symptoms include persistent cough that doesn't go away, shortness of breath with activity and later at rest, chest tightness or chest pain, wheezing or a whistling sound when breathing, fatigue and reduced stamina, unexplained weight loss or loss of appetite, frequent respiratory infections or bronchitis that keeps coming back, night sweats or low-grade fevers in some cases. Early warning signs. Early silicosis symptoms are often subtle and easy to dismiss. Many people notice shortness of breath, a lingering cough, or recurring chest congestion and assume it's age, smoking, or being out of shape. Because symptoms can appear years after heavy exposure, silicosis is often diagnosed later than it should be. When symptoms become severe. As silicosis progresses, breathing can become constantly difficult and physically limiting. Advanced cases may involve extensive lung scarring, reduced oxygen levels, and in some instances, respiratory failure. Some individuals require supplemental oxygen or repeated hospital care. In severe situations, long-term complications can extend beyond the lungs, increasing overall medical needs and impact on quality of life. Do you qualify to file a silicosis lawsuit? You may qualify if you were exposed to silica dust on the job, have a diagnosed lung condition consistent with that exposure, and can document the type of work performed, such as cutting or grinding stone, concrete, or engineered stone products. If the disease has led to significant medical costs or long-term work limitations, you may have grounds to pursue compensation. Contact Gianaris Trial Lawyers or use the chatbot on our website, lawforpeople.com, to get a free consultation to find out if you or your loved one qualifies for legal action. What if you were diagnosed years after exposure? A delayed silicosis diagnosis is common, especially when exposure happened gradually and symptoms seemed minor at first. Being diagnosed years later does not automatically prevent a legal claim. In many states, timing depends on when you discovered, or reasonably should have discovered, the connection between your illness and past silica exposure. That's why it's important to act quickly after a diagnosis and preserve your work history and medical records. Who can be held liable for silica exposure? Liability in silicosis cases often extends beyond one company, especially when exposure occurred across multiple job sites or products. Depending on the facts, potentially responsible parties may include employers who failed to follow basic occupational safety standards or provide proper controls, contractors or job site managers who allowed unsafe dust conditions or ignored known hazards, manufacturers or distributors of materials that generated airborne silica dust without adequate warnings or safer design, companies involved in fabricating or installing engineered stone countertops or other stone countertops when proper dust controls were not used, entities responsible for supplying inadequate personal protective equipment or failing to maintain it properly, Owners-operators of facilities where dangerous dust exposure occurred repeatedly. The legal process of silicosis lawsuits. Silicosis lawsuits center on whether dangerous silica dust exposure could have been prevented with proper safety controls. Many cases involve stone fabrication and similar trades where cutting and polishing materials can generate high levels of airborne silica. The legal process examines whether companies knew the risks, failed to reduce exposure, or allowed workers to operate without adequate protection. The goal is to clearly establish exposure, connect it to the lung disease, and pursue compensation based on the full impact of the diagnosis. Key steps in the claim process. Silicosis cases are document-heavy and move best when evidence is gathered early before job sites change and records disappear. While every case is different, especially in complicated silicosis with multiple exposures, the core steps often include medical confirmation that the worker was diagnosed with silicosis and documentation of disease severity. Investigation of work history in the stone fabrication industry and identification of exposure sources, job tasks, materials, products, and employers. Collection and preservation of records showing the level and duration of exposure to silica particles and other hazardous dust. Identification of liable parties, which may include employers, contractors, stone manufacturers, stone countertop manufacturers, or artificial stone manufacturers. Development of medical causation support linking exposure to lung inflammation, scar tissue, and resulting impairment. Preparation and filing of claims or lawsuits, and negotiation with defendants and insurers. Litigation steps when needed, including discovery, depositions, expert review, and trial preparation. Resolution through settlement or verdict based on liability proof and damages documentation. How long do I have to file a silicosis lawsuit? Silicosis claims are subject to strict filing deadlines, and the clock often starts at diagnosis, not the last day of exposure. Because the disease can appear years later, timing rules vary by state and can significantly affect your rights. Delays can also make evidence harder to obtain, and wrongful death claims may have separate deadlines. Speaking with an attorney soon after diagnosis is critical to preserving a potential claim. Potential compensation. Silicosis can be a life-changing diagnosis, and damages should reflect the real costs of a progressive disease that can lead to long-term disability. Depending on the facts, damages may include past and future medical expenses, including pulmonology care, imaging, medications, pulmonary rehab, and durable equipment. Costs tied to breathing impairment, including home oxygen systems and supplemental oxygen needs in advanced disease. Lost income and lost wages, plus reduced earning capacity when a person can no longer work in their trade. Pain, suffering, and loss of normal life caused by shortness of breath, fatigue, and daily limitations from irreversible lung damage. Costs linked to severe or complicated silicosis, including treatment for related severe health complications. In the most serious outcomes where silicosis leads to death, damages are pursued through wrongful death claims for surviving families. Gianaris Trial Lawyers. Gianaris Trial Lawyers handles high-stakes toxic exposure cases for workers harmed by preventable workplace hazards, including silica-related lung disease. Our team investigates how exposure occurred, whether employers and contractors followed basic occupational safety standards, and whether companies ignored known risks or allowed work practices that exceeded the permissible exposure limit. We also examine the role of the supply chain, stone manufacturers, stone countertop manufacturers, and artificial stone manufacturers when product decisions and warnings contributed to unsafe exposure in the stone fabrication industry. We work with qualified experts to establish causation and document how inhaled silica particles lead to lung inflammation, permanent scarring, and incurable lung disease that disrupt daily life. If you or a loved one is among the silicosis victims now facing serious impairment, our silica exposure attorneys can review your work history, preserve evidence, and help you pursue compensation for medical care, income loss, and long-term harm. Contact Gianaris Trial Lawyers, or you can use the chatbot on our website, lawforpeople.com, to see if you qualify instantly.